The Right2Know campaign has endorsed the statement by several organisations opposing this planned national shutdown by the EFF tomorrow. Let's find out why that's the case. I'm joined by Right2Know's national coordinator, Verushka Memdutt, joining us this afternoon. Hello to you, Verushka. Good to have you on eNCA. Why endorse some of these organisations? What exactly are you agreeing with?
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to the viewers. I think, when we say endorse, we need to look at what we've said no to. We've said no to a forced shutdown. And I think what really comes to the front here is what was said this morning in terms of the shutdown will be taking place at the level of wards. And, when you look at the right to protest, and it is protected by the highest law of our land, the Constitution. And we're not saying do not protest, but what we're saying is that this protest and the call for this protest should be within the confines of the law that allows for this certain action to take place. So this morning, very briefly, let me just say that there was a call that said, we will shut down wards. A certain political party would shut down wards. What does this mean to an ordinary community who is not aware of the rights enshrined in the Constitution when it comes to protest? It's immediately raising fear and panic. And this is not necessary in a time like this. Indeed, in any active democracy, protest is very relevant. We must not discredit the right to protest. It is important that democracy to work, people go to the street and actually show what they want. Let it be heard, But even these rights now, when we say we're going to shut down, I think the big question that rises here is what does it actually mean? And the second thing is the utterances made by leaders of the organizing parties. That there in itself also raises fear among individuals. And in no way may it, and we know the history of EFF going to the streets. I honestly cannot say that they've had a protest that had gone violent. But what I can say is that by making statements which seem violent or seem to invoke violence, it causes a problem. And that not just, leaders would understand it. People that are often on the street within protests, they would understand it. But the language itself is causing panic within the country, within the communities. And I think that is what the problem really is here.
So it's not necessarily there's an expectation or a planned element of violence, but because of the language being used, Verushka, you're suggesting there could be elements that could take that sort of messaging, because that's all they've been hearing, or that's what they're listening out for, and turn this into something that it shouldn't be. Is that the concern?
Well, to be very honest, I don't expect it to turn out into anything violent. What we do expect as an organization which believes that the right to protest is one of the most important rights right now, especially in our country, is that people must be able to take to the streets, and people who are not participating in these protests or this action must understand that their right to go on with their ordinary lives is not violated. I don't know. I hope that makes it clear.
No, it does as well. And I suppose many people are also asking what the aim of a protest like this would be as well. What to your mind would have been the better way of handling something like this? As you say, the right to protest is enshrined in our Constitution. Everyone has the right to do it non-violently, of course. Is this, to your mind and to the mind of the Right2Know campaign, the correct way of having gone about this?
So we cannot dictate terms on which people choose to organize or demonstrate. And we are also not here to judge. But what we can say is that should the calls by leaders have been made on a better level, on a level or in a language that the people understood, the people on the ground understood, there would have been less panic. Because it is important. There's nothing wrong with having a shutdown. But to say that you're shutting down a ward, what does that mean? A normal person take that in simple English and say, oh dear, tomorrow I'm unable to go to work for X, Y, because the ward is closed, it's shut down, I can't leave home, But that is not really the case. Some of us would go on our ordinary lives tomorrow. We'd wake up in the morning and go to work because that is what our rights are. So as a leader, in making statements, it is important that we do not create panic. And secondly, it is even more important that the communities out there understand that their rights are in no way infringed. They must go about their ordinary lives, should they not want to support any protest tomorrow, or shutdown, as it was called.
So is this also about the language that's being used? It's almost, some critics are suggesting that while it probably will end up being peaceful, it's the language which is very concerning for most South African citizens who don't necessarily understand political rhetoric, for example.
Indeed. And, I think sometimes the way we say things carries the message. It's not necessarily what we're saying, but how it is said that carries the message. The language for us, or for ourselves, is that, calling a shutdown, what really does it mean? Are you shutting down the country? How are you going to shut it down? But by saying, okay, there have been shutdowns called previously and successfully so, right? But in this case, you cannot say shut down and make, make references that seem violent in nature and expect people not to panic. I think for us, the main concern is that every citizen within the country should understand that on Monday morning, they have to get up to a day where each person is able to move around freely to do whatever it is that they had set out to do. There aren't going to be any hindrances on people's freedom of movement.
And when you now start talking about how the authorities need to react in a situation like this, now this is where it's going to start becoming a tit for tat, isn't it? That there's going to be a planned, as we're hearing, a peaceful national shutdown, protesting on the ground. There could be one element who may or may not be, depending on who you talk to in a certain political party, will say that these members of the public are not affiliated, for example, with this political party. But now the police have had to react to that situation, and now you've got the political party accusing the authorities of heavy-handedness as well. It always seems quite a tenuous situation, almost provocation, one could suggest.
So, from working on the streets and being in protests, we do know that it is often people who are not party to these protests who provoke the incidents. It is often, sometimes you'll find someone who is not even part of the action, who has no clue, that could provoke. And then, yes, indeed, the person, party, or the organization that is, that has given notice is the one who is obviously taken across the coals, as though now, you are responsible. There has been violence in your certain, gathering, etc. But I think what would be very relevant is the monitoring and reporting. I think the way these events are reported also is very relevant. So authorities have to take the precautions. We cannot say that we expect them to sit down, step back. No, by no means are we saying that. But also, by taking the necessary steps, it also should not violate anyone's right to protest.
I was listening to a fascinating debate on radio on Friday afternoon. I forget who the host was. Asked a very good question. I'd like to get your thoughts on it, Verushka. If tomorrow, as we've been hearing, and many critics are saying that tomorrow should just be a normal day, it should just be a normal Monday, there shouldn't be any violence, no looting. Government's response, and this is where I was going with it, government's response to this by getting extra boots on the ground, having the police commissioner going out to OR Tambo International Airport, the police minister going on walkabouts, etc. That in its own could come across as being more concerned about this than they actually should be. And by doing what government is doing, they're creating a sense of anxiety in ordinary citizens. Because if government's reacting this way, how do you then get the citizens to not be concerned about it? But this is unusual action for our government, isn't it?
Indeed. But I think something that we can see from this is that the government have capacity to perform in their daily tasks. And I think a good question now would be to ask, why is it that normal policing doesn't take place this way? Not exactly with the extra assistance or with the army, but there is capacity, but how is it being used? Is the police, all the various sectors that have engaged now, are they doing enough on a normal day? Because it seems as though one action that has used the word shutdown has brought so much of attention and everyone to alert. It makes me wonder now that are they just sitting around sometimes? Is the real work being done? Does someone have to call action every time we want to see that various authorities deliver in their duties? So I think for us, I don't see tomorrow's action being violent. I would truly think that it would go ahead, but not in a nasty way. But yeah, I really, the authorities creating panic. I think some communities want assurance. Some are also more, panicked, but I don't think that it's as much as we would assume it is right now.
It's raised so many questions ahead of the elections next year, Verushka, and I'll ask you this in closing, my last question to you. So, national shutdown tomorrow, we can call it a shutdown, we can call it a protest, whatever you'd like to. The conversations around this, do you think these are important conversations to have ahead of elections next year? Because I love the point you just made now, that if you suddenly throw the word shutdown in there somewhere, then suddenly we have thousands and tens of thousands of police officers coming out the woodwork. We have the SANDF deployed. Ministers are suddenly running around the country doing what many would say is their day-to-day job. It's an important framing ahead of next year's elections, isn't it? Of what can actually be done if bothering to do so.
Yeah, indeed. And once again, we must, as civil society organizations, I think we're smart enough and we're experienced enough to know that all of the actions and responses over these past week or so have just been reduced to politics. And really, we must also take from it and know how best to use what has come up from this week to hold the government accountable, to get them doing what we need them to do.
Maybe I'll ask this as a last question. Forgive me, just as you answer, I keep thinking of another great question because I'm enjoying talking to you, Verushka. Is this going to achieve anything for the ordinary South African? Again, elections are next year, so to my mind, tell me if you disagree, anything a political party does or says now is going to be politicking. But does this shutdown tomorrow actually provide any clarity, give a sense of direction, a sense of hope, or a sense of reality for the ordinary South African ahead of next year? Does it achieve anything for the ordinary citizen outside of this political party?
So I think for the party that or the grouping that is taking to the streets tomorrow, and some of them may be affiliated to a political party, some may not. To these people to be able to go out there and express themselves is very important. So it may in some way make some impact in those circles. But when we wake up and on Wednesday morning we go back, or Tuesday, be it, we're going to still have load shedding. It's not going anywhere. We're still going to have everything that's going on in Eskom. We're still going to wake up with the same president. So I think, it is one means, but there's no end yet.
Yeah, there's no end yet, but I'm afraid I will have to end it there, and I really appreciate you coming on to speak to us this afternoon. Verushka Memdutt joining us from Right2Know. One view of tomorrow's national shutdown. Some are saying we mustn't call it a national shutdown. It's actually a protest, but it is being called a national shutdown. I appreciate the views of Verushka this afternoon. So what's